Welcome back to the show, Cherries fans, and thank you for joining us. Please do remember to hit the like, the subscribe, the bell button below. It does help our channel grow. So, of course, there is a cloud hanging over the Premier League at the moment with regards to PSR, profit and sustainability rules. AFC Bournemouth have been mentioned on Twitter, on Facebook, in some articles with regards to this. However, the accounts come out the other day that the club have made £44 million worth of profit, which is pretty decent. What we wanted to do was discuss in a little bit more detail with somebody in the know. We also wanted to touch on the Manchester City situation, the Chelsea situation, as well as those situations at Leicester City, of course, currently in the Championship, Nottingham Forest, and of course Everton as well. They're all pretty angry that, of course, Man City and Chelsea haven't been punished, but they have. So who better to actually ask than somebody who is an AFC Bournemouth fan? And it is a pleasure to welcome back onto the show Sky Sports presenter Mark McAdam. Welcome back to the show, Mark. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Just excited now for the final phase of the season now that the international breaks are done. It's full steam ahead for the Premier League title race, the battle for relegation, the sides coming up from the Championship. This is where it means business, and this is the most exciting time of the year, so I cannot wait.
Definitely. And it's nice for AFC Bournemouth not to be involved in that relegation battle. I know we're not safe just yet, but effectively we're pretty much there, aren't we?
Yeah, I think so. What, 13, 14, 15 points, something like that? I'd be gobsmacked if Bournemouth were to go down, particularly with the big black cloud that's hanging over Goodison Park and Everton at the moment with regards to their second point deduction. And, of course, we know that Forest have lost 4 points as well, so that shuffles them down the table. I think the key thing really between now and the end of the season is that the players play with that freedom. There's no pressure. There's no threat of relegation, really. So go and express yourself. Go and play some of the good football that we've seen them play so far this season. Keep on the same path that you've been on. Try and upset a few teams. Try and score some goals at home because we've not seen many at the Vitality this season. And just go and enjoy these last moments of the Premier League campaign and try and finish as high as possible. I guess points tally would be nice if we could get a record Premier League points tally, and just go for those kind of targets. And as we know, every place in the Premier League you finish could mean between £4 and £6 million in additional revenue next season, which is massive. You know, for a club like Bournemouth, you finish in one place or you finish 3 or 4 places above, and it could be 10 million quid, which is a player. That kind of stuff is significant. So, yeah, let's have a good, enjoyable end to the season. But it's nice not to have to worry about relegation.
Exactly. But I did message you the other day because, of course, there is lots, like you say, there's this black cloud hanging over the whole of the Premier League at the moment. Of course, Everton and Forest have both got points deductions. Everton are due another one. And there was rumours coming out, as there will be probably with every single club. And the rumours were that, of course, AFC Bournemouth have spent the most we've ever spent in the Premier League, most we've ever spent in our history. You know, we've normally spent, 500,000 on a player, but, of course, 130 million. These rumours were bounded around that, of course, David Brooks went to Southampton to make sure that we fell within the PSR. And I think everybody was a little bit nervous about where it went next. But as you told me on Saturday, and also the accounts have come out, we're in a pretty good place, and it is a load of rubbish, isn't it?
Yeah, I have to be honest. I was surprised when you messaged me and said, what's the deal with this PSR, David Brooks, and are we in trouble? It came as a huge surprise to me. I know that the club are really sensible and astute with the money they spend in the transfer market. They are very wise with what they do. And you have to remember, we've got people in place, Neil Blake and Richard Hughes, obviously, until he goes in the summer, that have been operating for a long time at that football club, and they've cut their cloth accordingly. They know what the club can do, what they can spend, what they can afford, and they always work to whatever Maxim was prepared to invest. They obviously had to break the boundaries a few times when they stayed in the Premier League and they wanted to stay in the Premier League and compete in the Premier League. They came down, they were sensible, they were wise. They signed what they thought were the right type of players to get the team back into the Premier League. They did that. We had 2 seasons outside of it. Of course, you have to be conscious when you're an EFL side about the money you can lose with regards to PSR, FFP. So therefore, the rules are slightly different. And that's one of the reasons why Nottingham Forest have become unstuck, because they have gone over what they're allocated to lose. If you've got 1 season in the EFL, 2 in the Premier League, you can lose up to £83 million over a rolling period. If you've got just 1 season in the Premier League and 2 seasons in the EFL, you're only allowed to lose 61 million over a rolling 3-year period. So Bournemouth's accounts obviously are affected. They can't lose the full 105 million like other Premier League sides. But whenever they sign a player, from my understanding, they put all the data, all the figures, all the numbers into a system, and that will then spit out what they're allowed to spend and where that puts them compared to their PSR commitments. So before they even do the deal, they already know where that leaves them afterwards with regards to the PSR. So I think the club's always been sensible. And I've always said, you know, we've got good people running our football club. Bill Foley wouldn't have bought an organisation that was struggling, that had a lot of debt, that had money going into a black hole. He's invested in an infrastructure and a club that is sound financially. That was what Maxim left. That's what he's inherited. Bill said he was going to back the manager. He was going to buy players. He was going to grow the club. He was going to build a training ground. He was going to look at a new first team stadium. He is doing that. He has stuck to his word. And once again, you're seeing in the financial figures that the club is being run as sensibly as it can. And even if there are rule changes this summer, I think the squad to cost ratio is something that the Premier League are looking at. There will still be room for movement with regards to Bournemouth's current situation. I think it's around 71% at the moment. And the Premier League rule is looking to be about 85%. So that means you can only spend up to 85% of your turnover on players and football wages. So, yeah, Bournemouth would fall within that on both accounts. And just finally, without trying to sort of make things too complex, obviously the accounts for 22-23 have to be submitted by all 20 Premier League clubs by December the 31st. Then the Premier League has 2 weeks after that date to say you're in breach of PSR rules. Obviously, Nottingham Forest and Everton were told you're in breach of PSR rules. The other 18 clubs were fine. Obviously, we are currently in a new accounting period at the minute that ends on the 30th of June. So if clubs have any question marks or doubts about whether they will be able to meet the current guidelines, they have until the 30th of June to sell players and balance the books. Now, I don't know the intricate details of the situation at Bournemouth, whether they have to sell players. I would be very, very surprised if they're in a position like, for example, Newcastle, Manchester United, Chelsea, where they have to sell players before they can buy. Bournemouth aren't in that situation because they haven't overly spent over the last few years. I'm pretty comfortable with the people that run the club that they are doing what is right for Bournemouth.
And do you know what? I've always said we're such a well-run football club. Neil Blake comes under a lot of unnecessary criticism. You know, a lot of people will point to, you know, his salary, which is, you know, all for all to see. But he's ran that club so well and got us into this position, you know, where we £44 million worth of profit. You know, I didn't see that coming. I thought, you know, it would be nice to have a break even, you know, if there's a little bit of a loss, fair enough. But, you know, £44 million worth of profit shows a business that is being run very, very well, considering the capacity of our stadium.
Yeah. And you just have to look at the income and revenue from match days in terms of Bournemouth's comparison to Brighton's comparison or Manchester United's comparison. It's chalk and cheese. There's no income there on a match day for Bournemouth. A lot of the money that is running that football club comes from the Premier League and, of course, the broadcast deal and the commercial deals that the Premier League have in place. So Bournemouth have to operate differently to other sides. They have to be astute. They have to be clever. They have to compete in a different world and using a different model. And I think, you know, the time we got promoted to the Premier League, you know, a lot of people were pointing the finger. We only signed, you know, Tavernier Neto was a free transfer. Rothwell was a free transfer. There was very little investment there for a reason. You know, they were cutting the cloth accordingly. They were doing what was right for the football club. Of course, they want to go out and sign the best players and spend cash, but they also have to think about the longevity of the club and the sustainability of the club. And once again, I've said it before. It really baffles me that fans criticise Neil or Richard, or I don't think, there are probably things that you could find that they've not done so well, and there's probably a lot of things that they say personally, we got that wrong, we didn't quite get that right, and we didn't do that right. But overall, I think they've been superb. I know how hard they work for the club. I don't care what Dominic Solanke gets paid. I don't care what the kit man gets paid. I don't care what Neil Blake gets paid. As far as I'm concerned, this is a huge business that needs a lot of experience and knowledge to be run. And these people have done an exceptional job. Richard Hughes has come under criticism a number of times over the last few years. Guess what? He's been headhunted by Liverpool, one of the greatest institutions in world football. He's taking a couple of members of his backroom team with him. That's allowed Simon Francis to step up. These people don't go to big clubs if they haven't got a record of being very, very good at what they do. And Neil Blake's another one of those that's been superb. So yeah, I can criticise them for certain things, but overall, it's a 9 out of 10. They've been brilliant for my club, and most importantly, we have to remember, and I remember, the buckets, and not knowing if you were going to get paid. I worked at the football club between 2001, 2006 full time. And most of the time, I didn't know if I was going to get my wages, because the club was run in such a way that there was just a constant fear about the future. That isn't there anymore. Everyone gets paid, everyone gets treated properly, and the club is going from strength to strength.
And it is the best period, for us financially. And I think it started with, of course, he's sadly no longer with us. It started with Eddie Mitchell, and then, of course, to Maxim, and now to Bill. But when you look at it, the people behind the scenes as well have been absolutely fantastic for this football club, and we're in the best place we ever have been. The one question I've got for you now, Mark, though, is because, and it probably echoes what a lot of Newcastle fans are thinking as well, plus other investors from around the globe who are thinking, right, I want to get into football. I want to buy a Premier League side. You know where this is going, don't you? Is it a closed shop? Is it a closed shop? That top big six, is PSR designed for them?
Ultimately, no. So ultimately, PSR has been brought in to stop clubs spending beyond their means. Yeah. And, spending unreasonable amounts of money in a situation that they just can't sustain. That's ultimately what it's brought in for. It's brought in to try and keep things more competitive. And obviously, for example, if Newcastle, who have owners worth whatever, 700 billion or something, if they wanted to go and buy Mbappe and Messi and so on and so forth, they could do it if they actually wanted to. They could go and buy the best players in the world, like what Roman Abramovich did with Chelsea many, many years ago. Now, Manchester United and Liverpool don't want Newcastle to come to the top table with all that money. They want to make it as difficult as they possibly can for that to happen. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why the rule's in place. But also, it's about trying to make it fair. Let's be honest, if every team could only spend 250 million a year on wages and transfers and agents' fees, everyone would have the same budget, and it would make the Premier League, in theory, more exciting. Yeah. But of course, if you're Manchester City and you turn over 720 million compared to Bournemouth's 140 million, they're going to say, well, we should have the ability to spend more money on our players because we turn over more money, we make more money, we're a bigger club, we sell more jerseys. That's why we should have that competitive advantage because of the size of our club and the size of what we've built. There is no right or wrong. There is no scenario here that makes it fair for anyone or everyone. You look at the sides that are coming up from the Championship, you're seeing a really uncompetitive situation that Sheffield United, Luton and Burnley are really struggling to compete with the other sides in the Premier League. That's no good for the Premier League. That's not good for football. So we've got to find a way to balance those ambitious clubs and those clubs in the top 6, 7, and those clubs coming up to make sure that the league is still exciting to watch for everyone else. And that's something that PSR is essentially trying to do. But it's hard because you won't ever please anyone. The important thing to remember, any rules that are in place now with regards to PSR were voted for by 20 Premier League clubs. So 20 clubs have a vote, 20 clubs can decide what happens. It only needs to have 14 of those clubs to agree on something for a motion to get passed. So they effectively have their own rules, and they are trying to make these rules work for everyone. But of course, the rules in 2015 are actually so out of date now because things have changed, transfer fees have changed, wages have changed, football's changed, the world's changed. So therefore, they need to be reviewed and looked at, and that's something that they want to try and fast track for this summer.
One big thing is, of course, you can see 3 teams there alongside us at the bottom. Of course, Leicester are in the Championship at the moment. There is a big question mark above them. Of course, Forest and Everton have got the points deductions. I'm sure Forest and Everton fans, though, are saying, what about Man City? What about Chelsea? Man City have got 115 charges, I think it is. Chelsea are under a lot of scrutiny, of course, how Todd Bowley has actually spent there, and some of the deals that he's done. I think he's found a bit of a loophole, to be honest, and you can understand why he's done that. But what would you say to those fans who are saying, why are we getting punished, but Man City and Chelsea aren't?
Yeah, so the 2 things they're both very, very separate cases. Now, I don't know a lot of the details with regards to the Chelsea situation. My understanding of that is that it was actually Todd Bowley and his board that reported themselves to the Premier League over things that had happened in the era before they bought the football club. So there were a couple of anomalies and things that they weren't quite sure about that they have said to the Premier League, we've discovered this, we're not quite sure about it. We're being open, honest and transparent, and we'd like to work with you to try and understand how this affects us and what this means. Yeah. So that's the situation there. Obviously, this is something before their time, and this is something that they have no control over. Obviously, Todd Bowley has come in with a model to sign young players and spend a lot of money. Mm-hmm. You have to remember that Chelsea make a lot of money, because they won the Champions League. They have been winning the Premier League. They have had a lot of European football. They are a global brand. They make a huge amount of money. And of course, they have sold a lot of players from their academy, and they've sold a lot of players. So if you've got, I think up until about the end of June last year, they'd sold something like between 200 and 250 million pounds worth of players. Yeah. They obviously then sell other players like Fikayo Tomori, like Mason Mount. And when you sell these players, they are 100% profit, as opposed to if you paid £50 million for a player, you sell him for £75 million, you then have to look at the book price. It's not £25 million profit to spend on new players. It depends on the book price. And that obviously decreases over the period of the contract, which is known as amortization. So that's the Chelsea situation in a nutshell. It's very complicated. They are at the moment really under the spotlight with regards to selling players before June the 30th to make sure they meet the current rules, because they have spent a lot of money. However, at the minute, no problem. 31st of December, no issue. The previous year's accounts, all fine. The Man City situation again, and now 115 charges. Now, what is important to remember is that is not 115 separate charges. That could be 27 charges for non-compliance. They've asked for some information, and Man City have said, no, you can't have it. And they've asked 27 times, can we have this information? And Man City have said, no, you can't have it, or we don't have it, or we're not sure, or we'll get back to you. Whatever, the check's in the post. So the 115 charges looks like on the surface, oh my God, but it's probably about 4 or 5 or 6 charges that have been recurring month by month, season by season, where they have not done what they have been asked to do. So that's something important to bear in mind. And the other big thing for Manchester City, the charges that they are allegedly facing are from, I believe, hacked emails, stolen information. Now, in a court of law, you cannot use stolen information to prosecute someone. You know, so you know that's it goes back to a football leaks scenario where emails were hacked and laptops and so forth and information, and then they came across this data and they said, oh, Man City have been bending the rules, and Man City will say, well, okay, we'll prove it. You know, we believe we've done nothing wrong, so therefore we've done nothing wrong. So that's where this case is very, very different, and it's not cut and dry. It's not simple. These are the rules. Have you broke them? Here's the accounts. Yes, you have. No, you haven't. This is very, very different. So that's why Man City is in this situation. Chelsea are in that situation. But the Premier League have said they will do everything they can to get to a resolution as quickly as possible. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Do you know what? It's because everybody's been going on about they've got so many charges and they need to be pulled up about it, especially the Everton and the Forest fans, and of course Leicester now involved in there as well. There's a lot of finger pointing, but I don't think anybody. It's great that you've explained that, because I don't think anybody really understood the charges that Manchester City really.
No, again, I don't know all the details.
Yeah,
we only get a little bit of information, and it's been going on for some time. But it's important to point out that, you know, this is historical stuff that goes back many, many, many years, and it's based on stolen and hacked information, and therefore that's where one of the big problems lies.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, Mark, I know that you've got to rush off and do another show, but thank you so much again for coming on the show. And, you know, no doubt we'll catch up with you towards the end of the season, or maybe in the summer. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we've finished a couple of places higher. Can we dream of Europe?
No, I would. No, definitely not. I wouldn't like that. You know, that would potentially, you know, be a big burden for the club next season. But let's just consolidate. Let's keep playing exciting football. Let's keep getting behind this young team. And, you know, again, let's just keep building. So, yeah, if we finish 12th this season, I'll be over the moon with that. And then next season, I'd say let's try and finish 11th.
Definitely. Well, Mark, thank you so much again. And likewise, you know, we'll catch up at a later point in the season, I'm sure.
Definitely. Cheers, Craigie.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us on this show. Remember to hit the like, the subscribe, the bell button, to be alerted to any new shows we do here on Up the Cherries in all departments. Also, do check out all of our other shows as well across the channel. We've had some great guests on recently as well, so do check all of those out. But until the next show, Up the Cherries, we'll see you soon. Thank you for joining us.